بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. It is 4 p.m. I think we are getting started with this healing circle today. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us on this very serious and difficult topic. Well, today's events are taking a toll on us in various ways. We go about our day, we go to work, we run our errands, and spend time with family. But in the back of our heads, we have some feelings that are unsettling. We get an uneasy feeling. Amongst the many challenges we are facing today as Muslims is the immigration-related events that have been escalating. The fear, anxiousness, and stress is weighing us down. Questions cross our mind. What do we do? Who do we go to? How do we act or even react? Do we even need to react? How do I manage this stress? Today, Maristan gathered a few experts on the matter for you, and we hope that you'll find answers to some of your questions. Understand that you're not alone and connect with your brothers and sisters who are going through the same challenges. Let me talk a little bit about Maristan. Maristan is a nonprofit based in California that provides culturally and religiously congruent mental health and psychoeducation services. Our clinical, educational, and research-based initiatives are inspired by the historical function of traditional Maristans, healing centers. Our goal is to revive the Islamic traditional function of Maristans with research and education stemming from the work of our partner, the Stanford Muslim Mental Health and Islamic Psychology Lab, to inform holistic healing of our clients and provide mental health care for all. Healing circles are one of our programs. They are ad hoc and usually held to address a crisis that the Muslim community is facing. As mentioned, for today's healing circle, we'll be talking about the current situation with immigration and immigrants in the US. Our first panelist is Lena Kamal, an immigration attorney and a Maristan board member. She is an advocate at heart with a distinctive track record in supporting immigrants and addressing immigrant matters across the US and around the world. She is often called to provide immigration services and guidance to other law firms throughout New Jersey, where she is based. Lena today will talk to us about the current situation pertaining to immigrants and immigration here in the US. Lena, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I don't know why my video is not working. If there's a way to let my video work, Rima, if you can help me out with that. Okay, assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you for having me today. I am here to talk about all the craziness that is happening, subhanAllah. But I first want to give a shout out to a federal judge who recently has called upon the release of Mahmoud Khadin. So inshallah, he'll be released, and he's ordered him released after over 3 months in custody. So alhamdulillah, justice is being served today. I'm very happy to announce that to everybody. So I wanted to talk about something that's really pressing on everybody. I get this a lot. I'm getting a lot of calls regarding the new travel ban. So in June 2025, most recently, just a couple weeks ago, Trump initiated the new travel ban, Muslim and African bans, including some Latin American countries. So basically, the whole and part of it is that he's fully suspended entry to Afghanistan, Burma, Chad, Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somali, Sudan, and Yemen. There are some countries that are up for grabs in the Middle East as well, but he hasn't initiated them. But we're hearing even countries like Egypt and Syria could be amongst the list in the near future. Now, partially suspended is Cuba, Venezuela, Laos, and Sierra Leone. And it's effective for individuals outside of the United States, not inside, as of June 9, 2020, who don't already have valid. Okay, assalamu alaikum, everybody, I'm here. So just to continue, on the travel ban. So basically, yes, this affects people who are in the United States or who are outside of the United States, not in the United States. Now, who isn't in effect and who is exempt from this? So currently, lawful permanent residents or green card holders and are exempt from this ban. And also people petitioning for green card holders are exempt from this ban, particularly only immediate relatives, parents, particularly parents, spouses, and children under the age of 21. Ethnic and religious minorities facing persecution in Iran and Afghan nationals are maybe qualify for exemptions. It also does not trigger or restrict presence and trigger deportation for those lawfully present in the United States as of June 9th, 2025. So if you're from those countries, you don't have to worry about that. And it also, any other visa, whether it's even a business visa like an H-1B or consulate processing, is either delayed, paused, or denied. So if you're from those countries, you know, it doesn't matter what other visa it is. If it's not an immediate relative petition, you can't do it. And also, like I said, DHS can't initiate deportation proceedings solely based on this travel ban. Now, what are my recommendations as an immigration attorney is do not leave the US. Honestly, avoid international travel unless you have an already valid reentry visa and or some type of advanced parole approval. Even then, we're suggesting if it's not dire or an emergency to please stay in the country. And also with regards to people who have processing applications prior to June 9th, prepare for longer adjudication times, possibly vetting. And if you plan on applying for immediate relative status, know that the executive order calls for extreme scrutiny in those cases. So please consult with an immigration attorney if you don't already have one regarding all the evidence that you need, because a lot of these will subsequently get RFE'd, which is a request for further evidence to prove the validity and necessity of those immigration petitions. And then what is the impact on the Muslim families? Similarly to last time, it was family. The largest impact was family separation. You know, a lot of families who had family members overseas from these countries were separated and they couldn't unite till after the ban was dismissed. Financial burdens, obviously, there'll be a lot of financial immigration burdens with regards to this. And then also it's going to impact a lot of mixed status families, you know, with regards to any families that are overseas or have already petitioned. And then, of course, Islamophobia, like it did last time. So we can go to the next slide. So yeah, I wanted to continue talking about the free speech and immigration and legal gray areas. Like I said, Mahmoud Khalil, alhamdulillah, has been ordered released. Inshallah, we'll see that soon. But the First Amendment, obviously, everyone knows, guarantees the right to free speech, to protest, freedom of association, religious rights. Unfortunately, these are being trampled on. And also one thing to note is that the First Amendment applies to everyone, regardless of immigration status. This includes lawful permanent residents, visa holders, undocumented immigrants, and those on temporary status. The Constitution itself does not specify who it does and does not apply to, which is why it applies to everybody. The only actually difference between someone who has citizenship and who doesn't, the one constitutional guarantee is the right to vote. So immigrants also have the right to remain silent, refuse searches, and access legal counsel if detained. And I know CAIR will be talking more about know your rights, inshallah. So despite these constitutional protections, recent federal actions have targeted immigrants, including legal residents and students, for speech critical of US policy and, of course, our best friend, Israel, apparently. The Trump administration has revoked green cards, visas, detained and sought to deport non-citizens based on their political speech or associations. I have a few clients in this particular situation now, particularly where the free speech is deemed adverse to foreign policy. That's how they kind of get them. is adverse to foreign policy of the United States or some type of threat to the United States. So high profile cases, like I mentioned, of Mahmoud Khalil, alhamdulillah, have been ordered released, and we'll see the repercussions of what happens in time to come. But it is really a chilling of free speech. And what does this have to do with immigrants is that, unfortunately, we're being advised, even through AILA, which is the American Association for Immigration Association, Lawyers Association, is to advise our clients not to be so vocal on social media. And if you have an appointment coming up to, unfortunately delete a lot of social media for prior to your interviews, delete handles or anything that had previous advocacy. And I hate to say this because it is having a chilling effect on many immigrants, including green card holders. But we really have to, as in your particular vulnerable position, if you are someone who is not a citizen in the United States, you have to self-center your political speech out of fear of immigration consequences. So, please keep that in mind. And what does this mean when you enter the United States is that, unfortunately, there is heightened secondary screening because of this. So, prior to entering the United States, a lot of people recommend having a burner phone. I advise my clients just to delete their social media off their phones, if possible, and to kind of wipe out anything that can track back to any of their criticisms overseas. So that's what I'd recommend. And I know that CAIR will be discussing more about know your rights at the border, inshallah.
Thank you, Lena. Thank you for all this information, concrete tips. If anyone has any questions for Lena, she's generously offered to accept any inquiries, and we will be posting her contact information later on in the presentation. I think right now we're ready to go on to our next panelist, Dr. Rania Awaad. Now that we have an overview of the current situation, now Dr. Rania is going to help us process some of the emotions and understand the emotions that we're experiencing and how to deal with our stress that we're experiencing right now. So Sheikha Dr. Rania is the co-founder and current president of Maristan. She is a clinical associate professor of psychiatry at the Stanford University School of Medicine. Dr. Rania is one of the pioneers in reviving Islamic psychology and has established multiple Muslim mental health clinics, clinical training programs for clinicians, and educational training programs for religious and community leaders that are custom tailored to addressing the mental health needs of Muslim communities. I'll hand it over to Dr. Rania now.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate Maristan for doing this talk. Thank you, Lena, who preceded me, and Zahra, who's coming after me in terms of this conversation on a difficult moment that we're in. We find ourselves often in difficult moments, subhanAllah, in recent years. And so I begin with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa sallallahu ala al-hadi Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. And, really calling here on some of our Islamic grounding to help us stay grounded in this moment. In this conversation, which is very legal in essence, we were reached out to and felt as an organization, it was important to have a conversation around the tensions that were happening, the fears that were being evoked, people disappearing. Certainly in LA, which is, we are in the San Francisco Bay Area here at Maristan, and LA, of course, is part of our state of California. The LA area has experienced incredible protests and difficulties in this last few weeks. And so we really felt it was important to have this conversation. Thank you all for being here. The conversation in terms of looking at it from an Islamic perspective, and then I'll come to a mental health perspective. And the two, for me, honestly tie hand in hand. So when we look at, for example, Islam's stance on justice, mercy, really speaking out for and advocating for those who are oppressed, supporting them, it's really important, as everyone here is likely familiar, the importance that Islam places on making sure we stand with the vulnerable, regardless of their nationality, race, immigration or legal status. And the Quran specifically speaks to this, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that people were created from a single man and a single woman and made into nations and tribes so that we can recognize or get to know one another. And in God's eyes, the most honored are the ones who are most mindful of him. And God is all-knowing, all-aware. So in this kind of perspective, you see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already predetermined that we are all of different backgrounds, of all different races and ethnicities and backgrounds, socioeconomic status, and so on. And we are not meant to treat one another differently based on these aspects that we don't have any control over. Rather, it's really what's on the inside. And this is the moral stance that Islam takes. The Prophet ﷺ narrated that by, said, by him in whose hand is my soul, you will not enter Jannah until you believe. You shall not believe until you love one another. And then said, may I inform you of something that if you do, you love one another, and that is promoting greeting amongst yourselves. So giving the salam, saying assalamu alaikum to all people of all different backgrounds who are Muslim, regardless of what they may look like and if they are different than yourselves. The Prophet ﷺ also said, "O my servants, I've forbidden injustice upon myself, and I have made it forbidden amongst you, so do not commit injustice." And these are kind of the foundational teachings of Islam. And because of these foundational teachings, you see that historically, if we look at it historically from an Islamic context, the way these theoretical teachings and foundational principles were then taken and implemented in Islamic history is powerful. You see it right from the moment at the beginning of the Prophet's Sirah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his own lifetime, where he needed to seek refuge for the early Muslims and sought out protection from the Najashi, who was the Christian king of Abyssinia, to take care of the early Muslims due to religious persecution. And he did. And the Muslims, those early Muslims were refugees, right? And they sought asylum in his country. And later in Islamic history, as the Muslims grew stronger and then were more in a place of power, they then extended the same kind of refuge to others. So you see the Sultan Bayezid in the Ottoman Empire, who offered refuge to those Jews who were expelled and persecuted Christians during the time of the Spanish Inquisition. And you see it again in more recent history during the Holocaust, when King Muhammad V said there are no such thing as Jews in Morocco, there are only Moroccan subjects. And he refused to deport any Moroccan Jews to any concentration camps. And up until very recently, you see in the Sudan that this is a country that now is battling and really having a hard time. We keep them on our du'as and really need to keep centering the discussion on Sudan. Prior to all of these conflicts, Sudan was a country that hosted over 1 million Muslim and Christian refugees of other backgrounds and other ethnicities, even though they themselves are defined as a low-income country. When you look at all of these different examples, these are coming directly from these principles, foundational principles I just mentioned, of Islam, related to the importance of understanding racial and economic differences in Islam outwardly are not the issue whatsoever. However, given everything that's happening in the world that we live in today, there are pervasive mental health concerns. We all know these foundational principles, I hope, inshallah, from an Islamic perspective. But what happens when the rest of the world isn't following these foundational principles, or even our own Muslim majority countries aren't either? And when you look at those who are immigrants, right, in immigrant communities here in the United States, the many that we work with, refugees, immigrants, those who have tenuous immigration status, there is definitely a sense of anxiety, hypervigilance, fear. We've already been through this before with the first ban, a travel ban, where, dubbed the Muslim ban, where families were torn apart one from another, as Lena mentioned. And so there is a daily fear of going out and about in society. What if a parent or sibling was taken away at any moment? There's also this sense of what we call in mental health field, anticipatory grief, meaning it hasn't happened yet, but it can happen at any moment. And because of that possibility that's always lingering there, even as you try to go about your day, there is this prolonged sense of mourning for a separation that hasn't even happened yet, right? But it may happen. And so we call this anticipatory grief, and also the concept of ambiguous loss. The rest of us, who many of us in the room may potentially have are not necessarily dealing with directly their own immigration status, but they may have family, friends, community members, mentors, others who do, right, who are facing these tenuous immigration status issues. And this is where we would put the term collective trauma, right? The collective trauma, when you think about what's happening with the immigration laws at the moment, these punitive immigration enforcements and displacements are really causing many of us to feel a sense of trauma, even if it isn't directly happening to you yourself. And so you can identify with the issues, you understand what's going to happen here potentially. And there's also a sense of mistrust, a sense of withdrawal, a sense of, is this really my country and really my people, right? And for those who themselves maybe were born here, they're citizens here, there's also a sense of a transgenerational trauma or inherited trauma, in which maybe you recognize what these aspects are because of your family, parents, grandparents on up who were in fact refugees or were immigrants. And when they first came, didn't have full documentation. So you know what this means, right? And what it may essentially lead to. From a mental health perspective, we are concerned about, and we're seeing higher rates of depression and anxiety, and unhealthy coping mechanisms such as sense of suicidality or things like substance abuse and addiction and other forms of, whether it be a chemical addiction or whether it be more behavioral addictions. And we're also seeing that this trauma, beyond the collective trauma that's happening, individual trauma, collective trauma, there's also the concept of layered trauma. And this is what I'd like to give an example of a family who is an immigrant or refugee family. They come to the United States, and it doesn't just sort of all become good there now that they're in a quote safe country. And there's a lot of questions around whether that's really the case anymore. But you come from a place, usually a war-torn place, and you're already carrying emotional wounds of displacement, potential exposure to violence, persecution, and wherever you came from may not be safe to go back to. And yet you come to this country hoping that there's some stability here. And then you come here and realize there's all these other laws and rules that could actually put you in danger again as well in these new set of laws in this new administration. And so you have, a re-triggering of that stress, a re-triggering of that trauma. And so these layered layers of trauma is what we end up calling complex trauma. And complex trauma is often understood as something that's ongoing, it's unresolved. There is emotional harm from many different traumatic events over time, and they're compounded one over another. And so when you meet somebody that has these kind of complex trauma, especially for those of us who are mental health professionals, this takes a lot of, extra assistance and delicacy in working with this, because not only is it regular depression and anxiety and any sort of emotional dysregulation, there's also real, not just perceived, there could be some perceived, but usually very real sense of, look, at any moment, myself or my family member could be taken away, or if we travel, or if we just go to the gas station or the grocery store, we don't know when someone's going to just show up in plain clothes and try to, send us back where? To somewhere that is not actually safe. But hence why we came here in the first place. So when you think about that layered trauma and the complexity of the trauma, you could see why the coping strategies sometimes can be unhealthy. And our hope in this discussion, and certainly in the organization Maristan and the work that we're doing with Muslim mental health, is really to hope to show more healthy forms of coping strategies. And really to, if anybody is feeling this sense of, and they're realizing that they or their loved ones are coping in unhealthy ways, we really want you to seek out support and help. Please know that we are here, we are supportive. We have ways in which, especially for those in the state of California, everybody and anybody can access our treatments and therapies here in the state of California. So we're really pushing for people to come to that point. So I just want to share what I mean by healthier, rates of coping strategies. And even before you see a mental health professional, everyone here, everyone listening in, there are things that you can do for yourself. For example, increasing self-observation and recognizing your signs of stress and trauma and burnout. Often we're not looking at ourselves in the mirror enough to realize, oh, the reason I'm binge watching or the reason I'm up until 2 a.m. just doom scrolling is because I'm actually pretty anxious and I'm actually not doing okay, right? So I'm trying to cope in these other ways, but there's a negative feedback cycle because of that. We're really encouraging people to look after themselves, both their mental and physical well-being, whether that be from professional counselors, and we're offering our services again, and also things that are not professional as well. We want to encourage people, to engage in physical activities, get some fresh air, journal, right? Meditate, pray, right? Find a sense of community, whether that be virtually or preferably in person, and then access services that do provide that assistance. There are several of them, and we'll hopefully be sharing an entire manual with all of you who have signed up with us. We'll be emailing it to you that has information that we're sharing today, and then a whole slew of resources for you as well. We also want to encourage you to not take responsibility for others' well-being. Look, it's like the airplane when they tell you to put your mask on first before you put it on someone else. You can't possibly help anyone else if you yourself are completely falling apart. But when you have your own mask on, right, you could help the other person get theirs on too. And at that point, you can give other people tools and supply them with the tools to look after themselves if you are in a good state yourself, and then seeking that support from colleagues, friends, and family members, trusted individuals who can help. I also wanted to share on this next slide, if we can go forward. Thank you. A couple more important concepts, such as the concept of moral injury. This is a concept that we have actually written about in the lab, the Muslim Mental Health and Islamic Psychology lab at Stanford, in which we've really explained that even from an Islamic point of view, and this actually many faith groups have this concept of moral injury, but what it means is it's basically, think of it as not a physical wound, but a psychological wound. You're wounded when your core values and your sense of justice are violated, especially at the hands of a system or people that you once trusted. So go back to the example I gave of an immigrant or refugee family. They finally were able to be placed here in the US, and they thought this was going to be safer grounds from the war-torn situation they were in, right, in this example. But they come here and they find themselves betrayed by the very institutions that promised them safety, fairness, and protection. So then what happens? This is where we call it as moral injury. There's this emotional impact where you find yourself with guilt and shame, right? A sense of loss of trust in the society, institutions, even in one's own faith. We see this too on an Islamic kind of faith-based level of a crisis of faith that happens. Why is Allah doing this to me? A sense of betrayal, isolation, or even emotional numbness. And I want to encourage everybody, as I mentioned earlier, with getting professional mental health care, the idea of Islamic psychology or Islamically integrated psychotherapy addresses these very points. If a person feels like they are morally injured, from what's happening to them and are having a crisis of faith, you can use the faith itself from within it to reground that person. So this is part of what I'd like to recommend to folks. And within Islam, there's some really excellent concepts, just to kind of close off with a couple of these key concepts, such as resilience. This is, of course, within our faith and something the mental health field really pushes as much as possible. And it's protective in the sense that for many of us, the sense of resilience comes from strong cultural ethnic identity. Many of us come from, ethnic and cultural backgrounds in which our people are resilient people, and they've had to be in order to get through everything we've gone through these last decades, centuries even. Also leaning on family and social supports in hopes that they are strong themselves. And if they're not, then of course we want to replace them with stronger supports. And then our own religion, our spirituality, and our advocacy are all things that allow us to have much more resiliency. And we didn't mention Gaza yet in this conversation, but we must, and the people of Palestine, and say, so many of us have learned what resilience means by watching the atrocities that are unfolding and have been for so long now in Gaza, but you've really learned the term sumud, like that concept of we are standing resilient, and our very existence is resilience, right? And is a way of advocating. So I hope, inshallah, you've all taken some of that as well. And I love the concept it shows up in Islam and it shows up in the mental health field of such a thing called post-traumatic growth. Only recently they've been writing about this in the mental health field, but it's part of our Islamic teachings forever. It's always been there. The concept that if Allah tests you with something that's very difficult, you can come out of that test even stronger, even better, and we believe more spiritually elevated. And a person who doesn't come from an Islamic perspective or a faith-based perspective doesn't understand this. It seems counterintuitive. What do you mean if I go through something terrible, then I'm actually going to be better for it? But the reality is even the mental health and psychological and psychiatric fields have shown through research now that a person that's gone through trauma, usually we think of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, that people have gone through trauma, that actually there's such a thing as post-traumatic growth, that there is a positive psychological transformation that can emerge from the adversity itself. And that a person that's gone through trauma can actually have a deeper appreciation of life, stronger relationships that they can build, have a better defined sense of their self, and have a better and more increased sense of inner strength. And that's powerful, that the field itself has come to this point. And I want to encourage you to redefine what that looks like Islamically for you, because honestly, the Prophet ﷺ taught us this very directly early on. He's taught us directly that if whoever Allah loves and the people he loves the most, he tests the most. And there's also this concept of a hadith in which he says that those of you who are, that even a person who, whoever Allah loves, he's going to test him to refine him, right? And so it's built into Islam, and now the science is actually finally catching up and showing us the same thing. So I know some of you will have this question of, okay, so if this is kind of, injustice in Islam, how is it that we can wrap our minds around this? How do I get through these concepts? And I encourage you to look at some of both the teachings directly in the Quran and in the Hadith. You have stories in the Quran in which there is injustice happening there too. You look at the story of Prophet Ayub, who loses everything, his wealth, his health, his community, his family, right? He loses everything, but through it all, he does not lose his faith. And he keeps on calling out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the verse in the Quran, indeed, adversity has touched me, and you are the most merciful, the merciful. And you see that through that patience, and they call it sabr Ayub, right? The patience of Ayub. Through that patience, he comes out the other end completely refined, and he's well, and he gets everything back that he lost, right? And the teaching here and the moral here is, the moral of the story is, you can get everything potentially in this dunya, and if you don't, there is an akhirah. And that's what the believer understands, that there is a hereafter coming. So in closing here, a couple of takeaways for all of you. If you're feeling hopeless, overwhelmed, what can you recite from the Quran? What can you recite in terms of du'as? So take a look at some of the points on the screen here. You'll find them in the manual that we were referring to, and also you could see them here on the screen and take note of them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, that Allah does not burden or require of a soul more than it can bear. And that's an important concept. Whenever you see yourself or someone else going through intense trials, Allah does not send that trial unless He also sends with it assistance to get through the trial. And this is a core Islamic understanding. And also in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that these trials are coming. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشَّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ, that we're going to test you with some of fear and famine, loss of property, loss of life, loss of crops. But good news is sent to those who are patient, who endure patiently. And when the difficulty strikes them, right? الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. That those, when they're struck by the disaster, they say, surely to Allah we belong, and to Him we will return. And that's a beautiful concept, that whenever you're going through something or someone else is, you don't just say this statement when someone dies, you say it whenever there is difficulty. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And a couple of other key things, takeaways here. In addition to the du'as and the verses of the Quran that we can call upon, there are also faith-based tools in addition to the mental health tools that we talked about. Tahajjud is a beautiful one, standing up at night. to pray, calling out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People who engage in tahajjud, they often say their life completely changes because of every so often consistent level of tahajjud. So keep that in mind. If you're awake in the middle of the night and can't seem to sleep, those of us who have some level of insomnia, tahajjud is a wonderful antidote. Dhikr, remembrance of Allah as well. And Allah, the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah, the example of the one who celebrates the praises of Allah in comparison to the one who doesn't is like the one who is living versus the one who is dead, right? So dhikr kind of brings the heart to life and really grounds you. And then dua, calling out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all the different forms of dua. And here's another one, if you want to take note of it. Where I really, really love this. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazan wal-ajzi wal-kasal wal-bukhli wal-jubn wa dala' ad-dayni wa ghalabat al-rijal. This is one of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say every morning and every evening. Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from distress and sorrow, helplessness and laziness, miserliness and cowardice, and from being heavily in debt and being overcome by others. Right? So these are all things that I hope, inshallah, you can take with you as tools and continue to ground yourselves. The mental health tools that we're going to leave you with are some breathing exercises. I'll just share a few of these. And again, they're in the manual for you to look at more deeply. But some of you have heard of breathing exercises but don't know exactly what they mean. So here are 3 such techniques. There is one breathing exercise technique that is you count backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it kind of grounds you. And you find 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can, it's losing its thing here, but 3 things, and then 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste, right? And this is there's so many different ways of doing this. You can count through them and then count the different things that you are able to bring that anxiety down and kind of breathe all the way through it. There's another aspect of this in which we call literally grounding, where you feel the ground beneath you and you feel your feet firmly planted, or you feel yourself sitting on whatever it is you're sitting on. And you then reach out to touch, to see, to look, to smell the different aspects around you. So there's different formations of doing this. This is one such one. In terms of breathing, there's something called box breathing, in which you inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and then hold again for 4. So they call it box because it looks kind of like a box, right? And when doing so, there's also the 4-7-8 model, and that's inhaling for 4 seconds, holding for 7, exhaling for 8. So as you can see, there's all these different varieties of grounding and breathing techniques, and they're all powerful, and they're all online. If you were to look on YouTube or Google these, you'll find examples of these done. So use these. You can use this without having to have a mental health professional directly with you. But certainly if your anxiety is going up and up and up, even though you're using such techniques, it's definitely time to see a professional, right? And lastly, as I was mentioning, please seek that support. It's really important to have as much safety planning as you can. I know Zahra will follow me here and talk to you a little bit about know your rights and what to do. What does that safety planning look like? There's some really great tips that CAIR has, and we're really happy to partner with them on this presentation today. But be proactive. Try your very best to reduce that crisis, that panic attack when the crisis kind of happens, by having put all these different steps in place. So have your local emergency contacts, your friends, trusted friends contacts, immigration attorney contacts. I'm sure Zahra will say this, but have at least 1 phone number memorized, because nowadays we have all these phones in our smartphones and we have no phone numbers memorized anymore, but sometimes you might need that. And then community support. Know where the local mutual aid and organizations, immigration rights organizations are. A lot of these will be in the manual that we will send you, but there may be some others, and CAIR has some really great resources as well to send our way. So know where they are and make sure you have hold of them. Oh, there's a couple more. Okay, there's a couple more. I'll share a couple more here. Thank you. Assigning a check-in buddy, which I think is a great idea as well. That way you're not feeling so isolated. Please make sure that because we saw this in COVID happen quite a bit, people just kind of, because of the lockdown, they really, really went into isolation. But if you are feeling this kind of isolation, find that buddy, whether it be family or friend or just someone you trust to check in on you. We tell our students this, by the way, all the time, because they go into their dorm rooms for the summer and hole up in there, and we just don't know what's going on with them. So assign someone to check in, and then prepare your legal documents and make sure you know that what the information is needed. And I'll let Zahra take it from here, inshallah, what that would be. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Rania. Jazakallah khairan. Your overview, like always, is informative and much needed to support us understand and manage our mental well-being within the context of Islam. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of questions, but before we move on, obviously, to questions or reflections or comments, I'd like to welcome our guests, Sister Zahra Billoo. She is the Executive Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, San Francisco Bay Area. A little bit of Zahra, she has led efforts to protect the rights of marginalized communities for over 15 years. She is a longtime advocate for immigrant justice. Her work weaves together legal advocacy, faith, and emotional resilience to support communities in crisis. Zahra approaches this work with a belief that healing and justice are deeply connected. She joins the circle with gratitude and a commitment to collective resilience, dignity, and hope. She will talk to us today about Know Your Rights. I think Dr. Rania and Lena actually mentioned that as well. But she will also inform us on what to expect and how to handle certain situations. So I'll move it over to you, Zahra.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much to everyone at Maristan who works so hard to bring all of this together. I am happy to be here. I had seen the news about Mahmoud Khalil's the judge ordering the government to release Mahmoud Khalil a couple of hours ago, and then Lena said it, but I think between when Lena said it and just right as I'm about to start, we've gone from a judge's order to he's actually been released, which for those who were following the news last week, you may have noticed the judge ordered his release last week also, and the government held on and found another way to hold him. And so just relieved he's out, and still there are so many people who are behind bars who have been kidnapped from their families and their communities, and our hope is that we can protect you in these situations. So my name is Zahra. I'm the director at CAIR, and for those who are not familiar with CAIR, our vision is to be a leading advocate for justice and mutual understanding. We work in civil rights and immigrants' rights. We work in policy and advocacy. We do a lot of programming and education, and then we work with the media. So one way a lot of people know us is they call us for help, and the other most common way they know us is they see us on television or the radio. The other programs help us ensure we grow our base and our power. Our local team in the San Francisco Bay Area is the oldest CAIR office in the country, but no matter where you're dialed in from, there should be a CAIR office near you. We have approximately 30 offices spread throughout the great land. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, perfect. So I wanted to jump right into it. Lena talked about the state of the law right now, and Dr. Awaad talked about how we're all receiving the news. The question that we have received the most is, what do I do if I'm in one of these scenarios? First things first, you always have rights. Just this morning, one of the lawyers on our team told us about an incident where somebody was scared and gave up their rights, and that's going to lead them to more trouble, unfortunately. So knowing what your rights are helps you stay safe, and understanding them in advance also helps you stay calm and collected during these scenarios. You always have the right to remain silent. If we were in person, I would ask you to say this out loud with me. I'm exercising my right to remain silent. You should also learn to say, I do not consent to a search. From the comfort of your homes, I hope you'll whisper these words at least a few times. It takes many, many sessions of practice to get comfortable with them, especially in instances of intimidation, but it's good to know. What I have told my clients and attendees over the years is that you can never talk yourself out of trouble. That's just not a skill that you have when you are up against government agents whose entire goal is to find out what they want to find out, and in some cases to confirm their theories, suspicions, and profiling of you. You can never talk yourself out of trouble. You can always talk yourself into it. So you have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney, whether you are visited by law enforcement at home, you are stopped at a protest, you are targeted by ICE agents, or you are coming back to the United States after your summer travel, you always have the right to an attorney. In particular, what you want to be careful of is if you are inside the US, you should never speak without consulting with your attorney. And if you're coming across a border or otherwise presented with a document to sign, you never sign a document without first consulting with an attorney. This is true if you're buying a house. It's true if you are starting a business. It's true if you're working on a prenuptial agreement. And it's true if the government is asking you to sign a document. If you are at home, law enforcement always needs a warrant to enter the house unless there is an emergency. So if somebody is bleeding on the floor and somebody calls 911, then law enforcement will not come with a warrant. That's an emergency. If they're chasing a suspect through a neighborhood, they may come into your house without a warrant. But aside from those very extreme scenarios, law enforcement always needs a warrant signed by a judge to come into your home. If you're on the street and you're confronted by law enforcement, you should ask, am I free to leave? So if you're at a protest and you're confronted by law enforcement, if you witness an ICE raid and you're confronted by law enforcement, you ask, am I free to leave? If they say no, things I mentioned about remaining silent and your right to an attorney are going to be especially important. And if they say yes, calmly leave the situation. Remember, you can never talk yourself out of trouble. You can always talk yourself into it. Next slide, please. So a lot of people have asked about ICE. Many people didn't know who ICE was until just the last 6 months. Now people are asking, what do I need? What can they do? What's possible? And some of you may have seen the news about ICE raids in Los Angeles as well as across California and different parts of the country. If you ever hear about an ICE raid, be very careful to verify it before you spread information. Half the time people say there is an ICE raid, it's actually some other type of targeted action or law enforcement activity. If you're in California, there are rapid response networks across the state who specialize in verifying reports. This is really important because we also don't want to spread misinformation or cause fear if it wasn't an ICE raid. Let's say you didn't see a warning, you end up somewhere, you see an ICE agent, or you're undocumented, so you're high risk for being targeted by an ICE agent. In interactions with ICE agents, you should ask to see their identification. You should also ask to see a judicial warrant. If there is a window or door between you and them, such as at your home or in a car, you can ask them to slide it under the door or through the window. If there is no valid judicial warrant, do not open the door. They can still force their way in, but you should never voluntarily open the door without a judicial warrant. You should never answer any questions without consulting with an attorney. And you should definitely never show any false documents, right? Sometimes people are moving through life in the United States with false documents. They need them to work, to do things at school or with their insurance benefits. I'm not in a position to judge that. What I can tell you is I understand that it's necessary, and you should still never provide those false documents to a law enforcement agent. That is in and of itself a crime. And you should never consent to a search. So if they ask if they can look in your backpack, if they can search your house or your room, or if they can search your car, you want to be really clear. I do not give you permission to enter my home, and I do not wish to speak with you. Please leave. Now, if they have a judicial warrant, they don't have to leave. They will continue to search. If they don't have a judicial warrant, it's going to be important that you not consent. If the warrant is narrow and specifies a part of the house, make sure that you withhold consent as to the other parts of the house. Now, on this slide, what you'll see are two types of warrants. So ICE can issue an administrative warrant. That does not require you to open your home or your car. They could arrest you based on it on the street, but at home, it doesn't allow them into the house. It doesn't give them permission to do anything. A judicial warrant, on the other hand, will require then that you open the door, that you let them into your house, that you let them into your car. It still does not require you to speak to them without an attorney present. That's never going to be required. The difference between the two warrants that matters the most is one, facial, so you'll just see that there's a visible difference, what you should be looking for in the case of a judicial warrant. And the actual authoritative difference between them is that a judge signs a judicial warrant. An ICE warrant is just signed by an ICE supervisor. A judge signs a judicial warrant. So if somebody ever gives you a warrant and says, well, I have a warrant, look for the judge's signature. Next slide, please. God forbid you are arrested. This happened to, I think, an average of 100 people per night in Los Angeles the weekend of Eid. Many were protesters, some were undocumented. It was a mix of different situations. If it happens, remain calm. Panicking, stressing out, yelling, getting angry, aggravating is not going to help the situation. Remain calm and stay silent. It's in your best interest at this point to exercise these rights. I said you can't talk yourself out of trouble. You're already in trouble at this point, right? You're in handcuffs. You've been detained. Stay silent. Anything that you say, those of you that watch lawyer dramas like Law and Order may know your Miranda rights really well. In fact, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Ask for a lawyer. You may already have an immigration attorney. You may already have an attorney at CAIR. If you don't have one, remember, earlier you were advised to always have a trusted contact saved in your memory because you're not going to have access to your phone if and when you are arrested. Call that trusted contact. Feel free to remember CAIR's number as well. And there's a slight typo here. It's actually 408-986-9874. 9875 is our fax number. If you call it, I don't even know what happens. Do people still fax things? So 986-9874 or care.com to find your local office. Again, you may not remember that, but hopefully you remember your mom's phone number, your significant other's phone number, somebody who can help you contact a lawyer. You may, for those of you who've seen the video of Mahmoud Khalil's abduction, he's telling his wife, Noor, to call their lawyer. And he's saying that repeatedly as they're taking him away. She needed to have that number saved, and she did, in order to be able to reach the attorney. Find out who arrested you. Were you arrested by LA County Sheriff? Were you arrested by UCPD? Were you arrested by ICE agents? Different agencies have different scopes of authority and will take detainees to different locations. So to the best of your ability, find out who arrested you. Ask for your phone call, right? So you're going to ask for a lawyer. You're also going to ask for a phone call. You maybe need to call your parents to let them know what is happening. You may need to call somebody who can support with childcare for your children. You may need to call work to say, I am not going to be able to come in tomorrow. You're not going to get an unlimited number of phone calls. You're generally going to have 1 to 3, depending on the jurisdiction you were arrested in. So that first phone call that you make is going to be the most important. And then immediately inform whomever arrested you of any health conditions. If there are medications you need to take that evening, the next morning, whatever it is, make sure you're telling them. They have an obligation to assist you with health conditions, but they cannot read your mind. And so if you don't tell them what's going on, you may not get the help that you need. Next slide, please. Another pressing issue that has come up for a lot of people, and Lena touched on this earlier in addressing the new Muslim and African travel ban that was issued by the president a couple of weeks ago. But the concerns predate that, and that has actually just has crystallized them. So at airports, US citizens can never be denied entry into the country. Never. You have an absolute right to enter. US citizens may be subject to secondary screening. What that means is, in most experiences, you come, you present your passport, you say where you went, and maybe one other question about whether it was business or pleasure, if you interacted with any livestock, or if you have anything to declare. That's all standard. Secondary screening is when they ask you to go to another room outside of the lines that everyone else is in, and then they start to ask you other questions. So agents can ask you about your travel history, destinations, and possessions. You never, and to clarify here, travel history being the most recent trip. So you are required to answer questions about your most recent trip, your your destination, where did you go, and then any possessions, right? You never have to answer questions beyond the scope of that. So extended travel history, you're not required to answer. Questions about your political beliefs, religious beliefs, or social media activity, you're also not required to answer. This is where it gets frustrating because they are permitted to ask you and you are not required to answer. And so oftentimes we see travelers end up in a stalemate here. Again, it's really important that you remember you have the right to remain silent. It's not uncommon for answers that are provided here to then be shared with other law enforcement agencies to retarget the traveler once they have settled back in the United States, or to target people that they named in their answers. Law enforcement at the border is really hoping, well, I'm tired and my guard is down and I just want to get home. So I might answer some questions now that I wouldn't have answered if I were just being visited at home. Remember, US citizens always have the right to enter the country. And so answering questions doesn't help or hurt you. What doesn't help you, it can hurt you. Non-citizens. Oh, this one's so hard. You have the right to remain silent, the same as citizens. But Customs and Border Patrol can deny or delay your entry if you don't answer certain basic questions. And so our advice to non-citizens is, of course, to minimize non-essential travel. If you are confronted at the border by agents who want to ask you questions, while I wish that you would remain silent, there is a risk here. If you remain silent, you could be denied entry, and we don't want that to happen. And so you have to weigh that risk, right? Keep your answers very limited. Assess whether or not you can risk being denied entry. And never sign anything without understanding it fully. Specifically, ask to speak to an attorney. We've seen some instances of green card holders here being asked to relinquish their green cards. And they could do it inadvertently if they're signing without consulting with an attorney. So never sign anything without consulting with an attorney. If you are detained for any period of time, ask why and make note of the agency that detained you, as well as, of course, which airport you're at, what part of the airport you're in. To give you an example, last week, 2 Palestinian visitors were coming to San Francisco International Airport, and they were detained for well over 24 hours, and then they were sent back. Now, these were not immigrants to the United States. They were attempting to visit. And a question that has come up a lot is, well, why were they denied entry, right? And so make sure that if you are denied entry or if you are delayed, that you are asking why. It will help you if you consider reapplying for a visa to visit. It will help you understand what you may need to do differently. Next slide, please. Securing your devices. Lena talked about burner phones. I have not heard reference to burner phones in my whole life as much as I've heard it in the last 6 months. And so I'm glad that we're getting 2 opportunities to talk about burner phones. As she noted, a lot of people are asking, should I get a burner phone, right? Nobody knew what that was 6 months ago. Now it's almost essential. So let me walk you through it. Not everybody can afford to get a burner phone. Not everybody has the time or memory to get a burner phone, right? Like getting another phone is challenging. And a lot of people are focused on it for purposes of travel. But securing your devices is important even every day. When I was speaking at a masjid recently, there were a couple of people who looked at me funny when I said that. I said, look, if one of you leaves the masjid and is texting and driving and gets into a car accident, law enforcement doesn't need anyone's permission to unlock your phone using your face to confirm that you were texting and driving and the car accident was your fault. Now, don't text and drive, but you can apply that example to a protest, a situation at school, or otherwise. So how do you protect your devices generally? Use strong passwords. It sounds really obvious, but it shouldn't be your birthday. It shouldn't be the city you live in. It shouldn't be your spouse's name. Use password generators to ensure that your passwords are consistently strong. Moreover, make sure that your touch and face ID are disabled. The way we explain this to people is that law enforcement has the authority to manipulate your body, but not to manipulate your brain. Here's what I mean by that. They are allowed to take your finger and fingerprint you if you are arrested. They are allowed to take your finger and unlock your phone. They are allowed to hold your phone in front of your face and unlock it. They are not allowed to force you to tell them a password. And so if you have touch or face ID enabled, all they have to do is hold the phone up in front of your face to unlock it. If you have a strong password on there, the only way they're getting in without a warrant and the assistance of the company that made the device is if you give them the password, which you're not required to do because you're going to stay silent. You should also avoid storing sensitive information on your phone, right? So if there is highly private information on your phone, but you still want to leave your Face ID on, you should probably make sure to wipe the device. Something that's not said here and that I sometimes take for granted, but I'll note, anything that leaves your lips or fingertips is forever. The number of clients we've had over the years who said something on Telegram, who reposted something on Instagram, right? Who had a conversation in a Facebook chat group. All of those things are forever. Even if you delete the messages, the service provider has a version of it. The metadata stays, right? And so do not post anything using your computer or your phone or otherwise on the internet that you would not want to talk to the FBI about. Now, you're always going to remain silent, so you're never really talking to the FBI, but you get the hint, or you get the direction I'm going in, which is to say that if you post content that would raise their eyebrows, you better believe that they will find you at your house. Now, when you're traveling, we are recommending logging out of social media accounts. This just makes it even harder for them to get in should they get to your phones. Keep in mind that Customs and Border Patrol can inspect your device, but you can say you do not consent to a search without a warrant. What does that mean? That means that they can take your phone. They can open it up if it's a flip phone. Does anyone still have flip phones? They can open up your laptop. But remember, you don't have to give them a password, so they cannot get into it. They may say, well, I'm going to keep it. Yeah, I'd much rather you keep it when it's locked and encrypted than you give it back to me after having had access to it with my password for even 5 minutes. Again, here, non-citizens need to understand the risk of asserting this right. You have that right. You may be delayed entry or denied entry if you're a non-citizen who asserts it, right? And so in that case, that's when that burner phone is really important, because if I don't have anything to show you on my phone, I don't have Facebook on here, I don't have any work files on here, I don't have anything about the protests on here, it's just a blank phone with 2 phone numbers that I'm using, sure, I'll unlock it. If I'm a non-citizen, I'll unlock it so that I can get in. Now, in those instances, if your actual phone is in your luggage, they're still going to get to it, right? So when people talk about carrying a burner phone, I want you to understand that for it to be effective, you need a full commitment to using it like a burner phone and not having another device on you, near you, with you, or otherwise. Now, if your device is taken, you should request a receipt and write down the agent's name and badge number. So sometimes they will take devices. We can generally get them back if you get the documentation about it. Otherwise, it's just a, okay, they have it. Who has it? I don't know. Then we can't get it back. Next slide. Some of this was touched on earlier in Dr. Awaad's presentation, so just double clicking into here. And this is so important, particularly for undocumented individuals and non-citizens. Know your rights. Remember your rights. Review all of the Know Your Rights material that comes out. It's the same, it's repetitive, but practice the statements. I assert my right to remain silent. My attorney will contact you. Identify a trusted contact person. So keep an emergency contact written down and accessible. And we talked about how you should have at least 1 phone number memorized. Your significant other should also have that phone number memorized, right? So this is in addition to you have each other's. Who's the trusted contact? That's someone that you're going to call if something goes sideways or not according to plan. Have legal aid contact information, right? So that's going to be CAIR or your other immigration attorney or anyone else that you would call. But if you're high risk, and here again, high risk is undocumented or a non-citizen who is potentially from one of the targeted countries or has had travel issues or law enforcement issues prior. Carry proof of your immigration status, right? So you do need to carry something if your status requires it. US citizens, you don't need to carry anything on you. Some people have taken to carrying their passports because it makes them feel more secure. To be honest, I don't know that it would actually help, but it may give you a sense of comfort, and that's important too. And then prepare with your family. If you are undocumented and have children, it's really important that you have a child care plan in place. God forbid you are abducted. What might your 10-year-old do, right? Like there needs to be a who's going to step in if mom or dad get taken away. Who do we stay with? Who's going to check in on us? Who's going to take us to school? And make sure that your family is aware of your travel plans or any plans to participate in mass action, civil disobedience, protest, or anything else that is being targeted. And here again, I think you should go to those things. If you are a US citizen, you should go to the protests. You should be on the front lines, but make sure somebody knows where you are, that you're going in groups, and that if you are engaging in high risk activity, that you also have a plan in place to ensure that you are protected and that someone knows what happens to you. Next slide. On the community safety and solidarity piece, maybe you never need this information. Maybe you are never ever targeted by law enforcement. You should still know who your legal organizations are, depending on where you are. Make sure you're reaching out to them, that you've got a good contact with them, that you're supporting them as well, right? They're under incredible strain right now. Create a buddy system for travel and events. Maristan talked about this as well. I am personally a believer in sharing my location with at least one or two people that I trust. And a lot of people think that that's really strange, like, oh, wow, that's so invasive. And it's like, yeah, it's so invasive until I'm in a car accident on the side of the road and I haven't come home for 3 hours. And my significant other is asking, like, where is she? Well, he can just look me up, right? Or if I'm abducted by ICE, he could see my last location. And so just make sure that one or two people always know where you are. And this is even more true for people who live alone. I started to share my location with my best friends when I lived alone because it was like, wait, there isn't even anyone at home to notice if I don't come home tonight. Support others who are facing these issues. And so if you ever see, one of the questions we've talked about in my family is if you ever see an ICE raid or you see a law enforcement action, what can you do? What should you do? Record it, right? You can live stream it onto Facebook or TikTok. You can post about it on Instagram. Record it. Law enforcement has zero right to privacy when they are engaging in their duties in public spaces. They may tell you to back up. You should back up. They may tell you not to interfere. You absolutely should not interfere. You cannot talk to a person who's being targeted by law enforcement. You can only record. But we do believe that recording law enforcement action is an important way to hold them accountable and to constrain their abuses. Make sure that you're showing up for others in your community, and then make sure that you're getting involved in your local community. Look, if your mayor knows your name and you get abducted, he will speak out for you. But if he doesn't, because you've never shown up in your community, on the civic side, he won't speak up for you because he won't know that he needs to. The same is true if we're talking about your masjid's imam or your local community organization or your neighbors. Get to know people before a crisis. And last reminders, your rights are real. They are challenged right now. People ask me, why is this happening? And because the government is always trying to grow its power. Rights are never given, they must be taken, and they must be protected. So the more that we see law enforcement abuse increasing under Donald Trump, but also candidly under Joe Biden, we saw how protests were targeted so much under Joe Biden. This did not start under Trump, it has been ongoing. Whatever rights are taken are not given back. And so it's not as though, well, if I just bury my head and I make it through the next 3 years, I'll be okay. No, you need to make sure that you continue to protect your rights. Know that you're not alone. You can see from the number of people in this webinar, and you can also see from just about every other event we're going to. Today I'm at this webinar, but I know that there's so many people, for example, protesting against war in Iran in San Francisco and across the country. And so we're not alone. We keep each other safe. Being prepared is, as Dr. Awaad talked about, an act of faith, right? So Our religion commands us to speak out for justice and to prepare. It's also an act of resistance. And then stay informed, stay connected, and continue to support organizations like Maristan and CAIR, who are on the front lines doing this work and who are ready and able to assist you, God forbid you experience any of these things. Our contact information is on this last slide. This is the correct phone number. Please feel free to reach out anytime, inshallah.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister Zahra. This is great. Thank you all, Dr. Rania Awaad and Lena Kamal, for all of this. This is much appreciated, and in your presence here is we're grateful for all the information you provided. We don't have a lot of questions. We will move on to question and answer, but we only have two answer the questions right now. And please, if you do have any more questions, just drop them in the chat box, or you can raise your hand. The first one is referring to this is for you, Lena. It's asking about when you were talking about people coming from overseas, they should delete any criticism. So the question is that criticism of what from your devices? This individual is coming back to the U.S. with family. Some have green card, they're green card holders, and others are citizens. And so they just wanted to know what they and how they should be prepared.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. So yeah, anything that is sensitive information, any legal information that you might have that you don't want them to be access to. In terms of criticism, I was talking more about anything within Israel, because they are equating that, as you know, to anti-Semitism. So anything of that nature you should avoid. I would personally avoid, if I had criticized the government or any of that, I would personally avoid any of that when you're traveling back, just to be safe, because especially if you're a non-citizen, as Zahra mentioned, unfortunately, they have full access to deny you. If you're not a citizen or a green card holder, they have full access to deny you entry. So I would just avoid all of it, especially because they have access, they have the ability to deny. One thing I did want to mention, just to touch base on you having your passport, and I really recommend that. Make sure your family members, friends have copies of your passport, green card, birth certificate, and visa, particularly if they can get copies of your passport and your birth certificate. That's really needed, especially when we're trying to get you out on bond if you are detained. So please have family and friends have that. And if you are detained, make sure prior to just going anywhere, really, that your friends and family know your A number if you're a non-citizen, because that is the best way for us as attorneys and family friends to find you in the system. Unfortunately, just having a name or a birth birthday isn't that helpful, especially now that as they're transferring people from different detention centers. So I just wanted to keep that in mind. And then if you are coming into the country and you're a green card holder, to make sure that you show some sufficient ties into the United States. So one, delete your stuff, honestly, unless it's an iCloud, they can't actually access the iCloud information. But like Zahra said, get proper passwords, don't do Face ID. Me, even personally, as an immigration attorney who has attorney-client privilege on my phone, I would even limit access and delete social media off my phone. And that's what a lot of us are telling others to do. And if you're a non-immigrant coming here, try to have sufficient ties to your home country, copies of paperwork and documents that show sufficient ties to your home country, just in case they ask any questions. Are there any other questions?
Thank you, Lena. Yes, this is the second question. Is using a burner phone for travel recommended for citizens and non-citizens alike? I don't know who wants to take this on, Zahra or Lena?
Yeah. So, sorry, Zahra.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so the burner phone is really like a second level of protection, right? You don't have to do that, right? Again, you're not compelled to disclose your social media or email passwords. They can't access like cloud-based content without your login. So it's just about avoiding those things. So if you have just a regular phone and not everyone can afford a burner phone. So if you have just, I have my regular iPhone here, don't travel with sensitive work files or information, make sure that you store critical data in secure cloud backups, and then delete stuff on your phone, delete apps and all of that you can just re-upload later as you cross the border.
Okay, the next two questions are asking about CAIR's information.
Really,
Um,
is it okay if I just,
yeah,
I want to
go
add to that. So I want to echo, I agree with Lena. I don't think a burner phone solves your problems. And it especially doesn't solve your problems if you then treat your burner phone like the phone that also has everything on it, right? So for it to be effective, one, most people do not need it. Do not need it. Follow all of the other advice to secure your device. But if you get a burner phone, treat it truly, forgive my choice of words, treat it truly like a drug dealer would, i.e., I only need it to call my dad to pick me up from the airport, right? That is the only thing I need it for. So that's the only thing that should be on it. If I add Facebook to the burner phone because I'm bored, and then I delete Facebook, I'm still creating metadata that's tied to that phone, right? So a burner phone is only useful, one, if I use it correctly. Two, if I don't have my other phone or devices anywhere near me, right? Because if they're in my suitcase or my backpack, and I produce a burner phone, they're still searching everything. They're going to find the other devices, and you'll get into more like confusion, right? Because why do you have multiple phones? All of a sudden you've invited all these questions versus just, I didn't want to lose my iPhone, so I got like this like little cheap one to take with me on this trip. I didn't need anything else with me, right? And so just keep that in mind. Once you use the phone for other things, it doesn't work as a burner phone. And I would say I recommend non-citizens who are traveling across our borders consider this. Like that's the only category of people where I'm like, I think you should consider it, because if they ask a non-citizen for their password, that non-citizen is better off providing the password, right? So they're going to get into the phone. There better be nothing there for them to find. And I remember this when I was visiting Palestine. They, we were told like Israeli security may try to ask for your device, and you better wipe your phone, because if you want to get into Palestine, you have to give them the password, which means there better not be anything on the phone, right? I went in committed to, no, I have attorney-client privilege and I'd much rather get deported, and I didn't have time to get a phone, right? So burner phone does not solve your problems if you don't actually use it correctly. But the only category of people that I think seriously should consider it are non-immigrants who won't have the luxury of asserting their right to remain silent when they're coming across a border.
And actually, I just want to echo Zahra, remind me of something. My client was taken to secondary because they had two phones. It was like, that's not what you were advised. She's like, you told me to get a burner phone. I was like, and keep your other phone at home. She's like, oh, she forgot that part. So thank you for that.
So yeah, the next two questions are about CAIR and contact information. We'll have a last slide of the resources we'll put up, and we can also share with you after this webinar the contact information for CAIR, their phone number and email. Another question: what if I already had some advocate social media posts when it was started, but I deleted it? Obviously, they have access to this, so what to do? I'm not citizen, but I'm traveling. I'll leave it. Lena, go ahead.
Sorry. Sorry, I don't mean that. Okay, I think there's a lot of also fear mongering going on too. And I just want to say we're doing this as like the best of the best, like what you need to do, what you should look out for. But at the same time, my experience as an immigration attorney, I haven't seen them, and I've had a few F1 students come in and out that were advocates at the beginning of, in 2023, and then later on deleted everything. They haven't, been put into secondary. They've been able to enter fine. I think that we can do our best. Like Zahra said, things will forever stay in the meta. But as long as you can try your best, try to wipe things that they don't have like first access to. I think you'll be fine. I also think that we need to not be so high strung. And I think Zahra would agree with me that, you know, there's a lot of fear going on. And I think that we're just do your best is what I would say.
All right. Zahra, do you have anything to add or? Okay. I have an H-1B visa and coming back. Would it be a problem that on my social media shows that I'm watching a lot of news, especially what is happening in Iran? I only use YouTube. I'll give that to Zahra or Lena.
Say it one more time.
So this person has an H-1B visa and they're coming back to the US. They're asking, would it be a problem that if they watch YouTube on their social media? So their social media history shows that they're watching a lot of news, especially what is happening in Iran.
Yes,
that-
they should be really careful. They should be very careful, right? Like this is I don't know where the person is from, but watching does also create a trail in the same way that posting does, right? And watching news on social media, I would say like watch from mainstream news sources, watch a limited amount, but get here quickly and then like watch whatever you want on social media. But I will note, and I think Lena said this earlier too, is that we are asking non-citizens to be careful about what they post online, right? Watching social media content is not that much more innocent than posting social media content, right? Yeah. Especially Iran right now. Let the US citizens like advocate for Iran, but the non-citizens be careful. And I agreed with what Lena said earlier, is I want us to be careful of not being overly cautious, but I also want us to like understand like, hey, what are real hot button issues that non-citizens need to be careful of?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just want to touch, so CBP, excuse me, has like I guess like systems that scan for behavioral and content like abnormalities. And so they do look at heavy consumption of Middle Eastern content, and especially subscriptions to like flagged media, like Iranian media or like Iranian press, could trigger questions. So just be careful with that, and, you know, as much as you can. And in an H-1B visa, I would actually just make sure that you come in with all your employment ties so that you can validate those to CBP when you enter and focus on that.
Okay, so next question. I don't know if you're able to answer this. As a Canadian citizen traveling outside of North America, and I am landing in a state in Michigan, I guess Michigan State, am I considered a non-citizen, even though it's only temporary? Yes. So short answer from Lena is yes. Okay.
Yeah.
The next question. So if I know, if someone who I know is Palestinian from Gaza moved to the US during the war, on what basis can ICE deport them? If they already applied for asylum and of course overstayed their visa, do you think there will be a chance of deportation, knowing that they don't participate in any protests? What threats will be there on them?
So all asylees at this point are subject to deportation, especially under Trump. So when an asylee overstays, they don't have technically status, but their status is tolling. So they have status technically, but you know, the most important thing is, you know, be mindful of your social media and your activism, obviously, like Zahra pointed out, and then also be mindful that you can be picked up on asylum. Unfortunately, after Trump, he passed an executive order saying that asylees, as well as other humanitarian visas, are able to be picked up by ICE and submitted to deportation proceedings. But however, because she's an asylee and she's seeking asylum, she will be able to have due process and be able to have her case heard. I have a few clients from Gaza currently on asylum. Thankfully, none of them had been picked up. And, you know, so just keep that in mind. And again, let everyone know your A number.
Thank you. Last question that we have here. Is there any safety concern seeking mental health support due to everything that's going on? If someone, Lena can answer, and if Dr. Rania, if you don't mind also chiming in on this.
Sorry, what is the question? Is there any safety concerns with getting mental health
Support? Yeah.
As a non-immigrant? No. There's no concerns on that. And that front, and from an immigration perspective.
I can just chime in and say similarly. The only thing that I'll say, and the experts here are more versed than I am, there's a discussion sometimes are worried about getting mental health support from public resources. So if you are somebody who's receiving Medi-Cal, for example, if you're in California or Medicaid, and then there's a question on whether that can be tied to records of yours. I know there's been some concerns in that way. Certainly the Trump administration has previously called for that this is, use of public aid could be something that is of use of a reason why a person may be deported back. And I don't know if Zahra or Lena, either of you could speak to this point. The burden of public aid is one of the things he had been calling for. So I know people have had fears of seeking that out. I just want to reassure people that if they're coming to a private organization such as Maristan or others that are private, and because we have this policy where we serve everybody within the state of California, whether you're using your insurance, whether you're doing sliding scale, or whether you're using our financial aid package, which means it's free of charge to you if you qualify, we will not be reporting and absolutely do not report anywhere to any sort of mental health care that you receive. So I hope that, I'm not sure if exactly the question that's being asked, but I hope that reassures those who are wondering and curious.
I just want to chime in if that's okay. I was talking in terms of deportability. You're not deportable for using any public services. Your deportation risks, unless you're obtaining them by lying about status or identity, or your unauthorized use of these things, then yes, that's a deportable offense, possibly. But the public charge rule that was put into place during Trump and also continued through Biden and continued now is with regards to using public benefits and applying for adjustment of status. It can make you grounds for inadmissibility to adjust status to citizenship, not necessarily to just get a green card. Or any visa of that matter.
Thank you. One question just came in. Jazakallah khairan for this session. My sister has TPS, Yemeni citizen, and an asylum case ongoing. She has a work permit and is working, and I worry about her with ICE. Our mom is a citizen and has applied for an I-130, but she hasn't been called yet. What things can we do to prevent deportation? And it seems like there's an assumption for deportation here.
Don't get arrested. No, seriously. I wouldn't worry. Truly, you have TPS, you're an asylum seeker, and your mom is a citizen, so that makes you an immediate relative. Obviously, I don't know if she's unmarried or under the age of 21. I don't know her age, but in that honestly, just stay low and don't get arrested. Truly, that would be my advice.
Thank you. Okay. Another question just came in. What documents do I need as a Canadian citizen planning to travel to the US?
So with Canadian citizens, obviously we have a treaty with Canada and Mexico, allowing Mexican citizens and Canadian citizens to come into the country with very limited, without a visa, technically. For all non-citizens, even Canadians at this point, because there's some hostility at the border because of our situation, political climate with Canada, we're finding a lot of denials. And I'm over here in New York, so I see it with the Buffalo location particularly. I would just provide ties to your home country. So if it's Canada, just, and it can even be just, a Dropbox copy or a picture copy of like a lease agreement or mortgage. If your kids are in school, registration of school, your taxes, like a tax statement, because they'll just want to know they have ties to home country. And that's any non-immigrant. You don't have to carry a file with you, just a picture here and there would do.
Okay, no more questions. I'll give it a minute just in case anybody has questions. But either way, if anybody comes up with a, wants to ask about another question later on, they can always reach out to our contact information. It's on our website. It's outreach@maristan.org. And you can always look forward to upcoming events or any kind of resources through signing up to our newsletter. Actually, okay, so I think I see a few more questions coming in. Let me see. There's one person that says, "Bi'idhnillah, I would be shifting to New York from India. What documents do I need?" I am not sure what the exact question here, but if Lena, if you have an insight.
Thankfully, I serve people all over the country. So if I can't answer that legally for you because I would need to know your situation personally, but feel free to call me or send me an email with your situation and we can discuss. Or any immigration attorney of that matter.
And we have Lena's information on screen here. It's towards the bottom. So we'll keep it up so you can get a chance to write it down. And another person is asking, any advice for Muslim business owners and their advocacy and activism?
I mean, one, make sure that you sponsor the next Maristan banquet, and then make sure you sponsor the next CAIR Gala. So put your money where your mouth is if you're a business owner, because you're actually incredibly privileged in this moment, right? So many Muslims have complained of feeling silenced and censored at work. It's actually been interesting to watch the cognitive dissonance in our community where it's like, oh, you're finally a PhD, or you're finally a VP, or you're finally a director, and you realize that you're completely muzzled at work. You make $500,000, like you never think about money, but you cannot put a Palestine post up on your LinkedIn, right? And so power and privilege have been really challenged in our community because for so hard, we worked to build resources and to build our big houses and our, oh my God, why are there so many ugly cyber trucks at the masjid? Like they're just really ugly. But imagine you like have the money to buy a cyber truck, but you can't. I had a friend tell me once, when somebody at work asks, how are you? I can't answer that honestly, because if I told them, some Zionist at work would come after me, right? Like on a regular basis. Business owners do not have that problem in most instances, right? And so make sure that your business is a pro-Palestine business. Make sure that your business welcomes not only Muslim employees and clients, but other marginalized employees and clients, right? And then think about who you are and what you do. So for example, if you're a restaurant, maybe you bring food to the local immigration attorneys, right? Or you are sponsoring food at a protest. If you're in communications and marketing, maybe you're doing pro bono work for your local nonprofit. And no matter what type of business you are, your local elected officials need to hear from you because they say that they cater to business owners, right? They want to make the business owners in their districts happy. That's something that we've explored, for example, in Congressman Eric Swalwell's district, is who are the Muslim business owners in the Tri-Valley who need to go to him and say, why do you keep voting in support of Israel? Like, we are business owners in your district. And so the path varies, but at the risk that you'd forget everything else I said, let me say it again. You should sponsor Maristan's next event.
Thank you, Zahra, for this, support for Maristan. So another question came in. My mother is a U.S. green card holder and regularly travels between Turkey and the United States. Each time she visits the U.S., she stays for more than 180 days. She is currently in Turkey receiving medical care, but is scheduled to return to the U.S. before reaching the 180-day mark. Are there any potential issues we should be aware of? Is there any risk of her being denied entry to the U.S. despite returning within 180-day limit?
So that you're always up for questioning, especially if you're out of the United States for a long period of time, even if it's under 180 days. Zahra mentioned a good point, is that they are trying to get people to sign an abandonment. It's called Form 407. It's a record of abandonment of lawful permanent residency. They are pushing people to sign these type of things. Don't do it unless you consult with an attorney. But again, I would recommend that she calls an attorney to get a consultation so they can talk about her exact case. But to be brief, like I said, with any person who is not a person from this country, make sure that you have ties. So if she's a green card holder or U.S. citizen, ties to the United States. If you're not either of those, ties to your home country. And then an explanation of why you were gone for so long. But again, that's only to be brief. I highly recommend she has a consultation.
Inshallah, I hope this answers most of your questions. I don't see any questions come in. Again, we can give it a minute or two for more. We still have a little bit of time. I just wanted to also mention that most of this presentation source was from the Stanford Muslim Mental Health and Islamic Psychology Lab. It is Maristan's close partner. There is a community immigration community guide to the immigration crisis in the Muslim ban coming out soon. This manual will be sent to you inshallah within the next week. So look out for that in your email. And then again, if you do have any questions, please sign up for our newsletter and just be updated to our upcoming events and future healing circles, inshallah. I also wanted to remind everybody Maristan is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and it is zakat eligible. Your zakat funds go towards our outpatient therapy. We do encourage you to seek out mental health services in California if you with Maristan, especially because we do tailor our services to the Muslim community. We do provide in-person and virtual services for residents of California. Your support and donations are important to us, and without it, this work is not possible. So inshallah, we look forward to your generous support. I think, well, I mean, it's just, this is not a question, but it is a nice comment. Of course, we as Muslims should support and must empower each other and stand up for our ummah. And this person's cheering us on, saying, go CAIR and rise up Maristan. This is a good closing point. Thank you so much. I just want to just kind of thank you everybody, Jazakallah khair, for coming up here and joining us. I didn't introduce myself. I am Rania Awaad. I am the Executive Director of Maristan. I don't usually present on these, so I had to kind of get adjusted to Zoom at the beginning. But inshallah, if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And we will, this Healing Circle will also be uploaded on YouTube. It is recorded, so you will have access to it, and it will be emailed to you as well, inshallah. One last, just open up if anybody has any questions. I'm sorry, any comments from Dr. Rania, Zahra, or Lena. Do you have anything to mention or say towards our closing?
On behalf of Maristan, I want to thank Zahra and CAIR very much. We appreciate the work that you all do, incredible work. And for our community, have always been there. We're always sending people to you. So we really appreciate all the resources and all the help. And I'm glad for this kind of mutual kind of partnership. Please feel free to send people our way as well. I want to thank Lena for being here as one of our board members and in her role as an immigration attorney and the support that she's given. And Rima, yourself as our executive director here at Maristan, I so appreciate that. And on behalf of just myself, I want to just let everybody know, I know these are really challenging times. I hope, inshallah, that you'll share some of these resources far and wide. This all will be on the YouTube channel, and the manual will be for you to have and spread everywhere. Please do send it everywhere to all your friends and people. The lab has worked very hard on getting these materials together as resources for you. And I also want to say that we will have an upcoming healing circle that's currently being planned on what's happening in Iran at the moment and overseas. I know many people are very worried about that. We didn't want to put everything into one healing circle because there's so many things where we need to heal from, subhanAllah, at this moment. But I'm going to just let you know that that's coming up. So please just know that that's, mark your calendars in these next couple of weeks. You'll hear about that. So please make sure you've joined our mailing list, that you've subscribed to the YouTube channel, and that you're with us here, for the long run, so you can continue benefiting, and that you keep us in your du'as. Thank you so much. Barakallahu fikum.
Thank you, Dr. Rania. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.